Dear church, let's talk about faith in the line of duty. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley. I say it every week that I'm excited about our guest. I'm really excited about having my friend Mike Hagar on today because, number one, it's been a long time. I hadn't gotten to talk to you in a while, Mike, but also because of what you're doing now. And I'm excited to kind of catch back up with you about your role now and in Arkansas. You know, Mike, you and I met, I don't know, probably late 90s in Charlotte, Arkansas. And
Yep.
you were a state trooper and, you were doing your regular shift. And I had the wonderful opportunity to ride around with you several times and keep you company.
You know, I'd forgotten about that.
Well, do you remember, I was thinking about this the other day. Do you remember when I was riding around with you one of several times that we did this and we were in Batesfield, Moorfield, which outside of Batesfield, and a guy
Right.
tops a hill speeding and we go to pull him over. I say I had nothing to do with it, but you're going to pull him over and there's a train coming and he sits and decides to cross the tracks right before the train comes and loses us. And so we wait on the train and we chase him down and end up catching him again. And I mean, that was one of the most exciting yet scary things that I've ever done. I saw you in a whole new light that day.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I thought you were going to say the guy got away, and I was thinking, well, what are you going to bring that up for? So at least we caught him.
So, Colonel Mike Hagar, let's get that right. I know you don't care about that, but I want our viewers and listeners to know. And also, now you're no longer, as far as I know, you're no longer on regular shift work and things like that. You're now in the governor's cabinet and you're doing some other things. So tell us about the hats that you're wearing right now.
Okay. So I am wearing two hats right now. I serve as the Secretary of Department of Public Safety and the Director of State Police. And the Department of Public Safety is, there's 5 agencies that make up the department. And I'm not going to try to list them all because I'll mess up and I'll forever hear about it. But there are 5 agencies. Each agency has their own director. And I serve 2 roles as Director of State Police, but also the Secretary.
Yes. And so in Arkansas, and those who know me know that I grew up in Arkansas, coached there and lived there for many years and before I got into ministry. And so before this even, you were security for Governor Mike Huckabee, right?
That's right. Yes. I actually worked on the governor's detail a total of 14 years and worked under 3 governors, Governor Huckabee, Governor Beebe, and Governor Hutchinson. But the majority of that time was for Huckabee and Beebe and about 2 years for Hutchinson. And
so now Mike Huckabee's daughter is Governor of the state of Arkansas, so Sarah. And what has it been like working with her? Have you enjoyed that?
Oh, yeah. The governor's great. It's surreal. When I met, I have to stop myself from saying Sarah, but when I met the governor, she was, I guess, I'm trying to do the math on that. She would have been probably a sophomore in high school when we met. And so, when you come full circle, one of my best friends at the time is now the captain, the detail commander over the governor's detail. And, I serve in this position. She's the governor, and it's just surreal, to look back at where we were then and now kind of look at the, positions that we're in now. So it's been interesting. But, the governor's great. She has this kind of tough persona that she is known for, with her time with President Trump and now as the governor of Arkansas. But, I tell people frequently, if you get to know her on a personal level, and you spend any time around her at all, you'll realize that, she's one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet. And, nice as she can be, she, grins from ear to ear. She's about half introverted, and hopefully she's not going to see or listen to this or I'm going to be in trouble. But, I think she's, honestly, I think she's just a little bit shy, believe it or not. And, a lot of times when she meets people for the first time and you talk and joke and kid about things, she's grinning so big she can't hardly talk. So that's a side of her that a lot of people don't get to see. But, she's a very sweet person.
Well, we want her to watch this, so maybe she'll want to be on the podcast as well. We'd love to have her on. It is interesting that, you see these public figures in a different light. than we do, right? And
Right.
but I think we do understand that the governor is, like her father, a person of faith, and I'm sure that
Absolutely.
makes it easier to work for her, right?
Oh, absolutely. The governor will tell you that she has a pecking order, kind of like I do, and a lot of us talk about. And like most of us, she tries her best to live that out. And that's simply God, then her family, and then her job. And she's very open about her faith, and I have a lot of respect for her for that.
Yeah, and you and I have had many discussions riding around in your police car and talking about faith and family and life and things of that nature. Tell us a little bit about your family right now and how things are going. I know you have a son that just graduated high school. Is that right?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Everybody likes their proud parent moment. So
Yeah.
my son did just graduate high school. Great student. He's a great kid. Takes that after his mother. And he was, he graduated with a 4.0 in high school. And, we were looking at college being the next step. And a few months ago, we're back in March, he came in one night and he told us, he said, "Hey, before I go to college," he said, "I promise I'm going, but before I go, I feel like I need to serve my country." And so we actually dropped him off a week ago today at the airport. He's in basic training as we speak. He'll be on active military orders for almost a year. So
Wow.
it's tough for us. He's my best friend. Everything I do, I do it with him. I don't have much of a social life. My wife and I both are kind of homebodies. So it's tough. Mom's not doing so well with it. It's getting better by the day, and I joke about that and I give her a hard time about it, but it's just as hard on me. And, I watch college football by myself for the first time since Breck was born this weekend. And I sit there, honestly, literally almost getting choked up thinking about it. And deer season will not be the same this year. I can tell you that.
I sympathize with every one of those sentiments. We have three, and my girls are precious to me, and I'd do anything for them. My son, we shared, all the same interests. He's now coaching. Of course, that was a big part of my life. And,
Oh, wow.
And having him 12 hours away right now that's been tough. So I do sympathize with that. I appreciate so much, your approach to life. The family that you came from, the way that you have handled yourself in your marriage, your family, but in the line of duty as well. And that's really what I wanted to get into is
Sure.
Talking about your faith and how that has affected your job, because you and I talked about it before, that you see the worst in people especially when you're patrolling, right? And so talk about just the impact that faith has had on maybe keeping you lined out, keeping you sane in those moments when it was tough, because I know you had those tough times.
Honestly, I don't know how someone does this job without faith. And I think you could say that about just life in general. But it's been a huge part of my life. As you know, I was raised in church. My dad was a pastor, and we were in church every time the doors were open. And as a younger kid, a teenager, sometimes I didn't appreciate it then the way I do now. But it's been a huge part of my life. I truly can't imagine trying to do this job and going through some of the things that we deal with without having that faith. And it's been an opportunity to use that sometimes for a means to comfort people. I can remember when I worked highway patrol, there were a number of times that you'd find yourself in a position of making a death notification. And many times throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to pray with families that had just lost a family member. And you could tell it was comforting to them. It's a common denominator that bonds a lot of us in the South. And it's absolutely been a very instrumental part of my career. There's no doubt.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of police officers over the years, and in this job had an opportunity to counsel with a lot of them that just have a really tough time after seeing things or dealing with things. We might call it post-traumatic stress disorder. And, when you talk to them, they have a real hard time overcoming those kind of things. How has that helped you when you face those challenges and those big things in life, not taking it home, because that's what they tell me all the time. It's hard not to take it home. And some even say it's hard not to take it out on my wife, or,
Right.
they want me to invest in them and talk to them about it, and I just can't. And it's got to be difficult at times to keep your Christianity intact while dealing
Sure.
with those challenges.
I think when you do any kind of work, whether it be in the ministry or this job, and you do have the misfortune of seeing the worst of humanity sometimes and hearing the worst stories, you're going to find an outlet, somewhere. And for me, it's faith. For me, it's always been prayer and the ability to give that to God, and and just pray that prayer to take it. That knowing that I can't deal with it. And, unfortunately for a lot of people, they turn to alcohol. They turn to, a different coping mechanism. And of course, that is destructive. So it's absolutely been a coping mechanism for me to deal with some of the things that we deal with. And just as a guide in life, I mean, not just work, but, just life in general, obviously, it's absolutely should be the core foundation for all of us.
Yeah. You mentioned it a little bit a while ago, but it sounds like that you have always strived to make faith and your belief in God and your trust in Him as a part of your work and a ministry in your job. Is that still true today? Are you still able to use your job as a platform for faith and ministry, or I know when you were patrolling, that was probably there was a lot more opportunities. Is that still
Right.
the same?
Yeah, in a different kind of way. So they, like a lot of people, every morning I start my day with morning prayers, and I'll tell you a quick side note to that. So everybody that has their quote unquote prayer closet, well, mine happens to be the shower. And that's the place that I can, it's quiet. And so a lot of times I'll catch myself sitting in the shower. I say my prayers. And it wasn't too long ago, my wife walked in while I was getting ready, and I'm sitting in the shower, sitting down with my head down, praying. She didn't know that. She thought I was having some kind of a medical episode. But regardless, that's where, I start my day. And, part of my daily prayers, besides asking for safety for first responders and, of course, the men and women of state police, but another part of that is just asking God to allow me to use this position to honor and glorify Him and to get that message out, when I can. So I try to never miss an opportunity when I speak in public to somehow, some way recognize my faith. And, and it's been amazing, the response to that. On September 12th, I spoke at a veterans event, commemorating 9/11 or 9/11. And I had the opportunity, we talk about sacrifice and service, and of course, Christ being the perfect example of that. And I made mention that, for me, the most, let me back up. So the person that did my introduction, our communications team wrote that biography, and I can take a shot at them because they're sitting in the room. But anyway, unfortunately, this gets a bio that's on our website, and the guy that did my introduction read it word for word, and it's kind of lengthy. So I got up there, and, and I had the opportunity to say, well, I appreciate the kind words, but, the one thing that's not mentioned in there is the most significant thing that ever happened in my life. And that happened at the age of 11 when I gave my life to God. So, afterwards, when I was walking out, I had multiple people stop me and say, hey, just want to thank you for, in a venue this big, there was almost 1,000 people in the room. And they, just want to say, hey, we want to thank you for, speaking at a venue like this, but using that opportunity to share your faith. And, it's just little things like that it's a reminder, I feel like it's our responsibility to do so. And it's a reminder that people appreciate that.
They absolutely do, because I can speak for me. I don't speak for everybody, but I think there's a large number that would say that's exactly who I want in a leadership position, is someone who bows before the throne of God, who understands that they are not the one in charge, that there's somebody higher up than them. And so I can see how that resonates with people. We've talked a little bit about how difficult it might be to keep your faith, or how essential it is to keep your faith in the line of duty when you were patrolling. And, now you're in a little different realm, maybe not as immersed in it as others, but it's kind of a political world now. So how has that been? And how, I'm sure there's some vitriol and there's folks who don't agree with you using your faith as a platform, especially in the political world. Have you noticed that has been difficult, or maybe surprised that it's been not that difficult? How's that been?
Honestly, knock on wood, I've not had any pushback on that. I've never heard anyone say anything negative about that. I'm fortunate. Again, my boss, Governor Sanders, is a person of faith, so I can assure you I'll never get any pushback from her. And at the end of the day, I answer to God, my wife, and her. So as long as I'm good with those three, it really doesn't matter. But no, I've really not ever gotten any pushback. It's a different world. I'm not a politician. I tell people all the time, this is not a political job. I just happen to be appointed by a political person. But that's not what we do. But, I also tell people I'd rather deal with a drunk or a drug addict on the side of the highway any day as to deal with a lot of politicians that I deal with. Having said that, we are blessed that in Arkansas, and I'm sure it's like that in a lot of places in the country, but definitely in Arkansas, not only do we have a governor that is open about our faith, but we have a legislature that is very, very spiritual in the way they conduct their business. The leadership in our legislature are Christian. They are open about their faith. So, I've really never received any pushback at all about that.
Yeah, that's great. And it's encouraging because I'm not a political person either. In fact, I get very disenchanted with all of it. But
yeah.
If you want to get me on your side, or at least start moving me that direction, start talking about God, start talking about your faith, because like I said a moment ago, that's certainly essential to me if you're going to be effective, or if anybody's going to be effective in a leadership position. So we kind of talked about the negatives. Let's talk about some positives. Your career now is how long now that you've been in Arkansas State Police?
Been with the state police for 28 years in July, and 29 total in law enforcement.
Wow. So tell me, in all those years, what has been the most rewarding aspect of your job?
I would say doing what I'm doing now. And the only reason why is because I get to see the work that the men and women of the state police do every day, and not just state police, but the other peripheral agencies that make up Department of Public Safety. Yeah. And I say this all the time, and I believe it with all my heart. Law enforcement is a calling, and I believe it's a calling just like the ministry, like people in the medical profession. It is absolutely a calling, and if you're doing this job for the right reason, then I do believe that you're called to do this job. Of course, we're comprised of human beings, and I'm going to disappoint them, and they're going to disappoint me sometimes, and that's part of it. But when you see the men and women of the state police specifically, and they go out every day and they put themselves in harm's way to protect people that they don't even know, that it takes a special person to do that. And they are so much better at this job than I ever was. And that's not lip service. I'm telling you, it's amazing when I see how professional that they are and how they handle their day-to-day obstacles. I mean, it's incredible. And it's almost like a proud parent that I get to, sit back and hear the reports. And, I've had different levels of supervision, throughout my career. And it for most previous, before I took this role, I was the commander in Troop A, which is the Highway Patrol Office that services the greater Little Rock area. And, it was amazing. I'd been out of Highway Patrol for so many years. I'd worked in a, plainclothes division, as you talked about, at the governor's detail. And so the almost 7 years that I spent at Troop A, it was really a shot in the arm for me, because I went back after so many years and I got to see these young men and women that typically that's what makes up Troop A. This is not necessarily a coveted assignment. So a lot of people start in Little Rock, and just to see them work and to see how good they are at their job, it was really, really encouraging to me. And now I have the opportunity to, hear the stories, see the videos, and not just for the greater Little Rock area, but the entire state. And can't say enough about the men and women of the state police, man. They impress me so much every day. They do an outstanding job.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for giving them a shout out, because we need to do that more often. And I know that we pray for them often, and I share your sentiment. So thankful, so grateful for the work that they do. Mike, I had a good friend when I was in Abilene who was also an elder at the church that I was at that, was fire chief. And he talked about how when he became fire chief, he didn't even know when there was a fire half the time, because he
Right.
was at the desk and he was doing administrative stuff and things like that. And he somewhat missed it. Do you miss it? Do you miss being in the patrol car? Do you miss doing the day-to-day stuff that you
Yes.
did early on? And,
Yes.
are there moments when you wish you could kind of do that again?
Yes. And yes, I do miss it. I love that part of the job. Again, that's the calling, right? I mean, it was to do that. And, I do miss it every day. I get the chance every now and then. The troopers give me a hard time. Of course, I have to commute back and forth to work. So occasionally I get the chance to plug in and, work with them on something. And they always give me a hard time of pretending to be a cop. And that's fair, because the majority of my time is spent behind a desk right now. And it's doing something that is completely foreign to me. If you'd have told me 29 years ago I'd be doing this, I would have laughed. I mean, I never was one of those people that this was not my aspiration. It kind of happened this way. You had to test for rank with our department. And I worked 12 years before I even took the test to become a sergeant. That was just never anything that I really, that wasn't a career goal. I wanted to be a trooper. And it happened that way. And after I made sergeant, I was fortunate enough to make rank and go through the ranks over the next few years. But that was not the goal of my career. This kind of happened by accident, honestly. But I feel like this is where God wants me, so I'm going to try to do the best job I can at it. But yeah, I miss being in that car every day and doing that work. That's what I feel like I was called to do.
Well, and you did it well. And I got to say, I go back to Arkansas quite often. One of the reasons we moved to Dixon is because it is closer to my wife's family, my family. And I was in Arkansas 2 weeks ago, and you got some sweet new cars that are driving around there. So that would have been nice to have one of those.
Yeah, that's something that with this administration, we really wanted to go back to. We call it the big hat law. And, the big hat law is really not about that hat that we wear as much as it is the mentality of the agency and the mentality of those that came before us. And so one of the things that we tried to do when I came back in this position is we tried to pay homage to those that came before us. And a lot of people in Arkansas, they're familiar with our white cars and the blue stripe, and it's kind of an iconic symbol of state police in the modern era. Yeah. But before that, we had different paint schemes, and one was kind of a baby blue car with a white top and blue wheels. And honestly, if you saw it anywhere else in the world, it'd be the ugliest car I've ever seen. But I happen to think it's beautiful because
I do too.
I remember that car when my uncle was a state trooper, and I remember seeing that car very often at my uncle's house when I was a little kid. And so there was a lot of kind of sentimental value to that car. And again, those that came before us. So when I came in, one of the first things we did is we put 24 of those cars out. We put 2 in each highway patrol troop. And we just recently, I don't know if you've seen this one, but we just recently did phase 2 of our retro cars. And that's going back to the 1940s. We had a black car with a white stripe, similar to the blue stripe that we have now. And we just put, I think we've got about a dozen out, and we're going to put right at 24 out of those as well.
Wow. Yeah, the one I saw was the previous one, the baby blue. Man, that was sharp. Yeah, that that makes some young kid want to be a state trooper.
It's funny. They're very, very competitive, and that's one thing I love about our agency. There's a lot of history and a lot of tradition. And when you're in troop school, which is our academy, you learn a lot about that. And that's one of the things that we really push on our new troopers is to embrace that heritage and embrace that tradition of the state police. And so they learn about those cars. They learn about, the kind of the time frames when those cars were in service. So when we started putting that car out, it was funny. We had 24, 25-year-old troopers that were working like crazy because it is a competitive thing to be issued that car, and they all wanted one. And now that we're putting the black cars out, it's the same way. So, and that's great to see. It's great to see those guys that want to embrace that heritage.
That really is. Mike, before I let you go, I want I want you to, if you're able to, I'm sure it's not confidential, but just kind of walk us through a day in the life of Colonel Hagar. I mean, what does your life consist of now? What does your day consist of? You mentioned that this was so foreign to you. I knew you before this and what you did, but talk about what you do now, just kind of what each day brings for you now in this role.
It kind of depends on the day and the season, honestly. Right now, for instance, we're pre-legislative session and we're working on our budget. We're working on our legislative packet. And a lot of work with the governor's staff, trying to get that settled. And come January, we'll start our legislative session. And for the next 4 months, my day will be pretty much daylight to the close of business, sometimes to well after, we'll be at the Capitol. And we just kind of run from committee to committee, testifying on whatever bill that may be either part of our direct legislative package, or it may be a bill that just has some type of an impact on state police. So we've got a great command staff and a group of people, support staff, that we all participate in that, and we'll spend as much time at the Capitol as possible. I found out, so when you take this job, or when I took my job last January, the governor's inaugurated, the cabinet's put in place, and you are in the session. It starts immediately afterwards. So It's kind of like jumping on a treadmill going full speed. And it was hectic, to say the least. You're trying to learn your job on the fly and learn the legislative side of things. So I thought after the session was over with, I was going to be able to take a breath and, try to settle in a little bit. And honestly, it got more hectic afterwards. And so it just depends. I mean, honestly, a lot of it is driven by the news of the day, the events of the day. Unfortunately, we've had some fairly hectic days in the last year and a half or so. And, that can start at 2:00 in the morning, or that can start at 7:00 in the morning. So it just depends on what's going on. And this is good and bad. No day is a normal day, honestly. We had the opportunity to get out in the state quite a bit, visit the troops and things like that. And I love those days when you can do that. The worst days are sitting at that desk working on budgets. I can, without a doubt, tell you that.
I guess there's pros and cons to any of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a pleasure for me. I hope you feel like it was worth your time. I know you're busy.
Absolutely.
And it was so good to just catch up with you in front of all of our audience.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I know it probably wouldn't make for good radio, but I would love to ask about Libby and the kids and all that. So you'll have to call me off the air and give us a chance to catch up.
Absolutely. We'll do that. And hopefully we can have you back on again sometime soon. And would love to do that as well, to keep up with you. And I want to let our viewers and listeners know that if you have a question about today's podcast, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If you have a specific question for Colonel Hagar, we will forward it on to him. I'm sure he'd be willing to answer your questions. And we just thank everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Mike, for being on.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's great to see you.
Absolutely. You too. And thank everyone for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.